Hey everyone, I'm sorry we're a little late today. I want to warn you all, for those who don't know me, I'm Alan Schimmel, CEO of TechStrong, editor-in-chief DevOps.com. And I happen to be based in South Florida, and we are getting one heck of a winter thunderstorm right now. And if I lose you, Malcolm will take over, but I apologize. Welcome to another webinar in our DevOps.com webinar series. Today's webinar is, and I'm going to just bring it up here for us. It's more of a roundtable discussion webinar. Is low-code development the right choice for your next project? And I'm joined by two people who I can't think of a better two people to have on this with us. One is, I mentioned Malcolm. It's Malcolm Ross. He's the VP Product and Strategy, Deputy CTO at Appian. Malcolm, is it Appian or is it Appian Technologies these days?
It's just Appian, yeah.
Appian.
You know the origin of the name, yeah.
Yep. And then joining Malcolm and I is, I'll do my best here, Sarah Falala Adel.
It's Falala, yes.
Okay, and Sarah is a solutions architect at AWS. So, Malcolm, Sarah, we're going to look under the hood here of low-code development platforms and discuss a little bit about what are the key components, considerations, how to align data and application architecture, etc. Malcolm, if it's okay with you, I'd like to ask, well, we're getting hellos from the audience, and please let us, it's always good to see where everyone's from. I should mention you could use the chat section for public chats and everyone will see it. There's also a section called Q&A, which is a really great section to use if you want to ask the panelists a question. So for most of you, that's in the right-hand corner of your browser. But Malcolm, would you do us the honors of kicking off here?
Sure, yeah, and totally understand. I grew up in South Florida myself, so
you know these kind.
Oh yeah, they come through fast and strong. And we were actually in the green room. I was looking up the weather in Fort Lauderdale where you're at, and it's like, yeah, I know why Alan's late. So, and I see people are checking in. We should get weather
script. But Malcolm, in an hour, it's liable to be sunny again, right? I mean, you
exactly,
never know.
Exactly. Yeah,
but it's pretty dark right now. You would think it's more like 10 o'clock at night instead of 1 in the afternoon. But anyway, let's, you know what? You guys are frozen on me. I might have lost you.
Yeah, we hear your voice all right, Alan, but your video is frozen.
Yeah.
Yep. Can you hear us okay, Alan?
Oh, boy. Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Maybe we should put in the chat.
We hear you. There you go. Definitely blame the weather here.
Alan, can you get this off?
I think he's a victim of the hailstorm. Yeah. There he is.
Guys, I'm very sorry. You know what? I don't want to mess this up. Malcolm, we have an audience here.
Yeah.
I'm going to beg to ask you to kind of take the lead here because I see I'm on twice already. I don't know the third time or what, but why don't you, Malcolm, if you don't, and there's a band coming through right now, I hear it.
Yeah.
Malcolm, take over if you don't mind.
Oh yeah. So thanks, Alan. And appreciate that weather storm goes through pretty quick there. But as Alan was talking, what we're talking about is trying to peel back the covers a little bit on low-code development. We talk to a lot of developers, and Sarah also from AWS is really engaged in the developer audience as well. And want to talk about some of those kind of misconceptions or conceptions of low-code and how it applies to kind of your development practices and building development practices inside an organization around low-code or other tools as well. So, maybe if I open up to you, Sarah, first, what do you see in the world? AWS has a massive footprint in developer audiences. And what do you see as far as, people using low code and the overall talk about that from the AWS perspective?
Yeah, so low-code development platforms focus on driving innovation more rapidly. And then just to talk about some misconceptions, low-code doesn't necessarily mean low power. So I think that misconception comes from people not understanding the difference between low-code and no-code. So with no-code, that's a visual modeling tool. So you can create simple applications, but it's not exactly great for teams. But low-code platforms can integrate with deployment patterns and help expedite delivery. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of modern applications these days. There's a lot of features that need to come out, and developers are seeing how can we bring out features faster. I've seen this in the serverless area. A lot of companies are adopting serverless, so they don't have to manage servers, and they're just really focused on developing features. And that's the direction that's going in, and it's the same with low code.
Yeah, and a big part of the conversation on low code has been this kind of fissure in developers. You have this new term, citizen developers and pro developers, and kind of wondering what you see. And Alan, we see you all right in the video, so I'm not sure if you're still there as well. But
Yes.
as far as, what is the truth? Maybe we can talk a little bit about that as far as citizen development and pro development, and the nexus in between as far as how low code fits into empowering these individuals. So go ahead, Alan.
Now, while I gotta tell you, it's really bad right now. But while I'm on, let me say this. So I look from where I sit, and I have a different seat than Sarah or yourself, obviously.
Yeah.
I speak to many low-code vendors. I speak to many practitioners, organizations that use low-code, no-code in certain different ways. To me, look, the rise of the citizen developer is real. There are a lot of organizations where non-traditional departments are using low-code, no-code tools to develop and deploy rather sophisticated, more than the just glorified spreadsheet kind of app you would think you're going to make with that kind of thing, right? They've come a long way. But for us, I think the bigger market is low-code, no-code tools for development teams, where these teams are under tremendous pressure to get more code out the door, to get more apps up and running faster. And increasingly, these apps are very sophisticated. They whether what APIs they have built in, what infrastructures they run on, how distributed and scalable they are. I mean, they make the world go round, though.
Yeah.
And so for us, the low code, no code space for the developer teams seems to be much more strategic. If there's a place for both, I'm not doing one at the expense of the other. There's a place for both, but they're clearly very different.
Yeah, and what I see also is like it's never good to look at anything in a black and white perspective, right? So it's like you're this or you're this, you're a citizen or you're pro. And the reality is the people who are being really effective with these development tools are in that gray space where they're merging business and IT into a more holistic unit, where they can combine the skills of more technical people with business understanding to deliver those results faster, and typically with low-code development tools. So it's when you think about embracing citizen developers, it's not really embracing citizen developers. It's merging the idea of development with business functions. And you see organizations like the modern organizations today, like the Ubers and the Lyfts of the world and these kind of digital first organizations, they really have completely blur the lines between business and IT, where they're working in concert together, using tool sets like these and low-code development to meet their business goals as far as new technology investments. So any thoughts on that, Sarah, from the AWS perspective?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Even there's like a recent Gartner survey that revealed that there is a talent shortage, and it's one of the biggest barriers for companies who are trying to bring out new features. And I completely agree that developers working with the business side to create features is really important, because sometimes as developers, we forget or we don't really know what a seamless user experience can be because we lose sight of that other side. So I definitely agree that it's a combination of low code and professional developers can really bring a more holistic solution to companies.
Yeah. Well, there's another misconception out there, or a concept of low code also that we should address around flexibility. That low code tools are like, playing a video game on Rails where you can't really explore your universe or go in different paths and things like this. So any thoughts on that as far as kind of especially AWS, you have investments in low code, we have partnerships with vendors like yourself, but also there's a huge amount of services and how these services can be used to complement low code to extend other areas. So just wondering if you're on Sarah as far as the spectrum of services and how low code plays into orchestrating these services that AWS offers as well.
Yeah, definitely. And before I get into that, there's a lot of room for custom development with low code. You can insert custom code, call APIs, and create fully customizable applications. And like, for example, with Appian, you have integrations with Amazon Connect, Private Link, and there's a lot of room to create custom applications in that way. You can also use HTTP and Open API to use connected system to configure these solutions. So contrary to the misconception, there's a lot of room to create sophisticated code using low code.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. It's just like AWS has such a large volume of services that a low-code tool is not necessarily a development tool that you think of. It's really, as Gartner says as well, it's a composing platform. It's where you're building composable applications. So when you think about limitations, it's really quite unlimited as long as you can find the good AWS service. Maybe it's a natural language processing or document understanding or other types of services you want to consume from these open APIs, things like this to explore. It's very easy to connect to those. And what you're building in low code is a composition of these services where you're taking microservices together in a drag and drop manner to build new experiences. So whether it's a user interface or a mobile application or new process or workflow, it's quite, to think of it that way, it's kind of a open architecture for just composing these things in a visual manner as well. There's actually one question. We just take these live as far as the security standards to be followed in basic principles. So I'm going to interpret that in the context of maybe security standards of how we compose applications in the concept of low code. So you mentioned, Sarah, a few things around open API. Certainly, like AWS has OAuth Sig 4 standards, things like this. But any idea on your perspective around the implication of security in low code and how you compose applications in overall platforms?
I don't have too much to say from my experience, but Malcolm, do you have any points for that?
Sorry, yeah, I was going off script, actually answering live questions as they come in here. But yeah, I'll take that as well. It's the idea of certainly that, low code application development tools are delivered in a way that is typically in a cloud fashion. So the best way to look at those is to look at kind of cloud architecture standards that they adhere to. So for example, as the Appian perspective, is the security of the architecture is very important for us. So we want to make sure that you have a FedRAMP compliance. If you're in the federal government, we're going to give PCI, HIPAA compliance, and methodologies for securely transacting and storing that data inside the cloud architecture. Now, of course, that's the infrastructure. So there's only so much like AWS and Appian can do to secure the platform. But at the end of the day, a customer is responsible for proper configurations of the security of their individual application components. Like if they're attaching to the AWS service, are they properly storing those credentials? What Appian does is we use a combination of prescriptive and artificial intelligence logics to basically look at the security profile of an application. We call this a security summary view. So we can look at basically all the security configurations of all your integrations, design objects, to validate proper security configurations, as well as ensure that as you're building, we can make best practice recommendations. So we're going to have real-time feedback to say, you know what, you probably shouldn't do that looping function over and over and over again. Or you probably, maybe you declared some variables over here that you never use in an application space. So we're going to give that real-time feedback and design time guidance that's going to give people those standards. And I see a follow-up question also from the same attendee, that a standard playbook to be shared with developers. Absolutely. If you go to like community.appian.com, which is our community site, you'll see a whole bunch of information around documentation, resources. We actually have, for registered users, a document called the Appian Playbook, which is exactly guiding you kind of the proper implementation methodology. But the playbook, from our perspective, it's more than just kind of the embedded features of how to build the individual features and functions of the tool and orchestrations. A lot of that feedback is in the tool itself as far as giving you real-time feedback. But outside of that, the playbook that we publish extends into the methodology of team structures and deploying inside of an environment. Kind of what we were talking about earlier as far as the alignment of citizen developers and business users with pro developers in a cohesive team. So we encourage building team structures of composite between these business and IT, adopting agile development methodologies, having that continuous feedback for developers from the business on their iterative cycles as well, and having a center of excellence team that looks at the potential for reuse across an application portfolio. Because a lot of times what you're doing is you're having multiple projects simultaneously. And you know what, if someone built a very interesting address validation tool, well, yeah, probably that tool inside that little logic area is probably useful across a number of other applications. So oftentimes you want to have that curation of the overall application library portfolio to promote reuse and accelerate development later on in projects as well. So, but going on to maybe another question that we had here was the architectural features that developers should be looking for when considering low-code platforms. It kind of feeds off of what we were just talking about, Sarah, around security, but maybe talking a little bit around how things like serverless and elastic scale are important considerations and what AWS's play is there.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, many companies are trying to, deal with their backlog, and they can't automate enough. And that's where low code and serverless come in. Another thing you should think about is that you should design for impact. So use design thinking techniques, since users say what they want, but you also want to continuously bring features that they may not have knew that they wanted. And then using that time and resources that you save, that you don't have to deal with servers and other obstacles, and accelerating your time to value.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's other aspects, when you think about investing in a low code platform, typically like everyone is going to have a site called like Trust. So if you go like ours, trust.appian.com, you're going to get a lot of information around the architectural features that you're looking for. The most important thing is to realize that digital investments are some of the most important investments you make today. There's been a lot of issues in the overall enterprise around security violations having big impact on customers, big impact on uptime of your operations, and now more correlated to your direct revenue or mission of your organization. So hold low-code vendors to the same standards you hold to your enterprise class applications. Even though you might be looking to a low-code tool for a departmental solution, doesn't mean they should be not adopting the latest security standards, elastic scale standards, cloud standards, availability standards. It's really important across your entire digital portfolio, and the low-code vendor should be providing that for free as part of the application portfolio. So as Sarah mentioned, elastic scale, global availability, these things are really important to look at how that infrastructure is being provided across the entire perspective. And then another tip, I would say for thinking about architecture is the capabilities. Low code, if you look at like Gartner and Forrester's research, they track over 400 vendors that advertise themselves as low code. So it can be very confusing because low code is increasingly simply an adjective that describes the delivery of a specific type of technology capabilities. I've seen even video game software development tools be advertised now as low code to help you build video games. So you need to look at the intent of your purpose, right? So yes, it's a low code development tool, but does it include the features that you are hoping to achieve, such as workflow, process automation, artificial intelligence design, document processing? Does it include a mobile design capability? Does it include, public portals, things like this that you want to build? Really, I would say look at low code as an adjective more so, and look at the depth of the feature sets that comes with that as well, and the partnerships, that vendors like AWS bring to the having that huge library of additional services to connect to as well. So another question here to think about is also planning for long-term success as far as you start a low-code project. What is the initial strategy that we endeavor in to think about how do we ensure that this is not just a one and done project, but maintain this for a long-term program? So, going back to Sarah, as far as thinking about this, as far as if someone's brand new to low code, looking at this, what are some of those things that AWS can say that's going to make them ensure that they have a confidence in a long-term strategy?
Right. I really believe that, AWS and Appian, we build together to solve problems. Appian and AWS have been partners since 2007, and that really says a lot about the partnership there. And as far as companies and how can they build for long-term success, I've seen that usually they'll bring in someone and make them a low-code expert and have that low-code expert train others in their team, enabling others to help add features. And I think it's really important to have that point of contact of someone who really understands the low-code platform. And then, of course, as we spoke about other, features that, architectural things to look out for the long term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's certainly a journey and something that, it's not something that you're going to endeavor in a short term, because if you look at application development platforms, these are rarely short-term investments. Look at Java, .NET, things like this. You might have been doing development on these for decades. And oftentimes, especially in enterprises, your investments are expected to be, amortized over 10 years or so. So these are long-term things. So, like what you mentioned, Sarah, as far as the overall ecosystem of AWS, that viability, right? So is this organization running a low-code platform on a rinky-dink kind of their own little cloud? Or is this a large global operation that can support you for a long time, well-funded, publicly traded, things like this as well? Thinking, go ahead.
Oh, I also wanted to emphasize what we talked about before of organizing around small agile teams. That's something I've also seen with Serverless that's very successful. With small teams, you have less room for miscommunication. That one team is good at the one thing that they're working on, and it's very sustainable. It helps bring out more features, and it doesn't have as many obstacles because there aren't as many people working together. So I think that's also important when thinking about long-term success.
Yeah. And I see actually another question came in around Appian specifically about what is the low-code Appian platform built on? To address that, of course, our infrastructure, if it's not obvious, Sarah's with AWS is our key partner. So we've been running on AWS cloud, as Sarah said, since 2007. So a very long-term relationship as far as infrastructure. And we use a lot of important services from AWS like Private Link, KMS, Route 53, EC2, their Kubernetes, Lambda services. Basically, we use these core services for the infrastructure and orchestration security of the Appian environment. But on top of that, Appian itself is obviously built on a programming language. So in the back end, we use Java. Java is our primary middle tier layer for application architecture. We run that in things like Kubernetes, the type of container architectures. But on top of that, we have a user experience layer that we use internally, React. You're probably familiar with like React Native, React.js, which is a UX framework. But our customers never touch that. Our customers only touch these Java and React type components when you want to extend the Appian platform. So we allow our customers to build new modules using Java and React. But the low code design experience, we actually have our own declarative framework for user experience. We call this SAIL, which is our user experience design framework. And then also we use standards like BPMN for process modeling, decision modeling notation for business rules, very declarative ways for building the application architecture inside of that. And we also have some really unique investments as well, as far as our what we call ADS, our Appian Data Server architecture, which also obfuscates a lot of the need for complex database administration. ADS is actually a patented architecture which amorphously changes and optimizes and reshapes data based on design time usage. So if I were to suddenly make a pie chart through aggregations of specific data, Appian intelligently recognizes the intent of the design through our declarative interfaces and then reshapes and reforms data architecture behind the scenes to accommodate the intended design, all for the purpose of accelerating it. And then probably there's another question here around, is there any specific framework for low code as well? I guess that's a pretty high level standard, but when you think about framework, I'm going to interpret that as like OMG standards. If you're familiar with the object management group, they do UML, BPMN, BPEL, a lot of these standard frameworks. So yes, there are frameworks for certain areas of low-code design. The one that Appian subscribes to most is the DMN, Decision Modeling Notation Standard, which is basically a way for modeling logic inside an application through a decision table. It's functional, declarative, it's visual, very easy for business users to understand how they're going to say, well, if this, then have this occur. The other standard that we adhere to also is the Business Process Modeling Notation by the OMG, which is how you model workflows, and also in Appian robotic process automations. So it's a standard for defining kind of logic of workflow from step to step. It has things like swim lanes. It has circles for basically events, squares are activities, and decision points are diamonds. And it's a visual language that helps business and IT communicate what they're going to do maybe in a complex workflow. These standards are really important because these frameworks and standards that you adopt don't just help, obviously, business and IT communicate on a common language, but also by being an industry standard, it makes it easy to transfer skills from one platform to another, right? So you don't want to go too far down a path of learning proprietary kind of design frameworks. There's multiple aspects of lock-in, but one of the aspects of lock-in is knowledge lock-in, where you basically skill yourself overly to a specific proprietary design framework, which means you need to reskill yourself to other areas. So looking at adoption of these frameworks and as far as modeling standards is very important in consideration of low code. Going back to the original question as well around long-term success, and kind of a few other thoughts maybe add there is also professional developers often realize that the experience of building software is often a very small subset of actually getting software in production. And that the larger portion is, really around the software development lifecycle. How do I develop tests? How do I push it? How do I use Git to do source code control? How do I use Jenkins to do CI/CD? How do I put all these tools together? And you can see as much as like maybe only 30% of time of a developer in high code environments being spent actually building, and the other 70% spent being testing and pushing and getting production. So mature low code tools, it's something to look for too, is when you look at these tools is, are they simply just focusing on composition, or do they actually have awareness of SDLC through either integration with your existing infrastructure? Like, do they have a Jenkins integration? Do they have Bamboo integration for CI/CD? Or do they provide a seamless framework themselves? Appian specifically, we try to incorporate a lot of the elements of SDLC into the design experience itself, such as when you build rule logic, well, wouldn't it be great if I could build the unit test for that rule logic in the same design experience? I don't need to go learn JUnit if I already built in Java. So yeah, it's like good low code tools should really solve these harder problems of making the SDLC really fluid as well. And that's going to again lead to that long-term success as far as your ability to not just build quickly, but build quickly with confidence and with quality and high-speed delivery as well.
Malcolm,
You look like the storm has passed.
it's still dark out and it's rumbling, but I'm surprised you guys didn't hear it. It was
We did. I could hear the hail on your window there.
Yeah, it's the roof. It comes out of the
roof.
Anyway,
Oh my
it's gone.
gosh.
And hopefully it'll get light out soon. But this issue on frameworks, though, is that I think one of the things, and maybe it's a bad rap, maybe it's not. And Sarah, maybe you have thoughts on this, is that low code, no code is another quiver in the arsenal of the developer or of the IT team or of the business unit. It's not such a unicorn that other frameworks that software development uses, that it negates it or ignores it or obliviates it or is not sophisticated enough to use.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that is a perception in the market that, Malcolm, I'd like to see the Appian folks kind of really hit head on, is that just because you have a low code, no code tool doesn't mean, especially for developer teams, doesn't mean that everything you've been doing and everything you've learned is useless or not part of the next step. All of the great infrastructure and tools available on that AWS platform, they don't go away because you're developing in low code, no code.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, sometimes they're even enhanced.
Yeah.
And I think people need, there's this thing, you're using low code, no code, so you're giving up.
Yeah. Like you're no longer,
sacrifice. Yeah.
You're no longer cool anymore because you're, I used to, I got my computer science degree, and when I was writing code, I learned just to write in VI. If you're familiar with the VI tool in Unix. So that was like my main coding platform and I refused to get off it for a while. And I thought, you weren't cool unless you knew all the keyboard commands to quickly navigate VI as far as indentation, things like this. So there's definitely perception there. And there's a pride of ownership inside kind of that knowledge of high code development tools. But when it gets down to it, you need to realize that your contribution is to a larger organization. The business has goals, and your value to the business is not necessarily measured in specifically your knowledge of, how to do proper memory management in a Java application. It's really how quickly can you deliver high quality application experiences to the business to meet the business goals. And the people who can do that are the ones who are going to exceed in their career. And the people who do that leverage the latest tools and technologies that help them achieve those goals. So that's why we've seen an explosion in CI/CD tools, because they accelerate high quality software development. It's why we see great innovations in like test automation software, and Selenium usage and Cucumber for writing human readable tests, things like this. All these things are around how can I meet the business goals faster. So it's important to see, again, as you said, Alan, low-code is just another quiver in that tool set. It's just another tool to help developers achieve business goals faster and meet the demand and move on to other projects. So anything to add to that, Sarah?
Yeah, I want to I agree with you, Malcolm. Low code lets users focus on business problems at hand and strategic differentiations rather than the underlying heavy lifting that comes with traditional programming systems. And that's how we applications become more modern and are able to innovate faster. Same thing with serverless. Customers may have been a little bit worried, well, can I customize my applications as much if I can't handle the servers? But what we've seen is that the serverless services at Amazon have become highly usable. Some applications are run only on serverless. So it really shows that this is the future of modernized businesses. And when I was in school, we learned about like assembly line language, and, we can't keep using that to, innovate for the future. We have to come up with new ways to innovate faster. And yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and there's another question here around frameworks.
So
Frameworks being compatible with microservice architectures. And maybe to address that just very quickly, you got to think about, especially in the concept of microservices, as 2 areas. You have the architecture itself, does it run in containers and microservices, things like this. But again, low-code tools are most frequently composers of microservices. So you're going to typically be consuming microservices, whether they're packaged microservices from like AWS, or whether they're things you deploy yourself and deploy in Lambda. The low-code tools like Appian come into play as the orchestrator of these microservices into specific patterns. Those patterns can be an interface where I want to combine maybe some mapping software with this and this and this into experience, or they can be in API orchestrations or workflows that I need to orchestrate certain areas. So the word compatible there, as far as microservice architecture, yes, the word compatible though is emphasis on composable. So low-code tools are designed to compose microservices. And another question maybe, if Alan, you're on, there's another question around a FinOps administrator, how to push back on low code as a FinOps administrator. I'm not sure.
So I'm not sure on that question. If you want to expand on it, FinOps is about controlling cloud costs and stuff like that. So are we pushing back on low code because it increases cloud cost, or pushing low code because it decreases cloud cost? I'm not sure, and I think it's Chinari. If you want to expand on that in the chat, I appreciate it. While we got this break, though, we do give out Amazon gift cards at all of our events, and we do have 4 winners today. Our team will be emailing. It's Dennis D, Diego G, Emmeline W, and Tim P. So we will get you out your Amazon gift cards, and thank you very much for participating today.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen an expansion on that FinOps question. Sarah, a FinOps question, I naturally go to the AWS person. Any idea what she's referring, or what they're referring to there?
No, sorry, I don't think I'm the best person to answer that question.
Yeah, I guess is feel free to expand on it, and maybe as we go to our last question here around the future of low code and how things are evolving over time. I guess Sarah, maybe do you have any perspective on what AWS sees as far as low code impacting how people consume your services?
Yeah, I mean, even just to reference last month's Gartner Strategic Planning report, they're saying that by 2025, 70% of all enterprise applications will be using low code. And I definitely agree with that. I think even just the pandemic really showed that there are certain times where new features have to come out faster. And with the low amounts of IT coverage that companies are experiencing, I think it's really important for companies to start adopting low code. And I do see it being a big thing in the future.
Yeah. So I see there was a clarification also. Maybe best practice for you on the AWS side, the question was specifically around FinOps is, how do you optimize cost consumption and enforce cost consumption? So what tools maybe does AWS have? I guess maybe that's some people's worry is they love Lambda services so much that they're going to rack up a huge bill by firing off 1 million microservices. Does AWS have those tools in place to kind of help administer their overall spend and how the services are consumed?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also important to note that we've reduced over 109 times in cost savings since we launched in 2006. So there'll constantly be, cost savings that from AWS. There's also many different services. You can create alerts for your usage, depending on if you have a bar that you don't want to go over. So there's definitely room to automatically be able to handle, your cost to make sure it doesn't go over.
Malcolm, I was out at KubeCon. Was it last week? It feels like, I think it was last week. And I actually had a chance to interview the director of the FinOps Foundation, part of Linux Foundation. There are a lot of tools, many of them open source and free, that you could use to help with FinOps, to help
Mhm.
handle and better insight into your cloud costs. I don't know if they're low code. Like what I'm, and I don't mean to be facetious, but I don't see the low code angle. Are they looking for a low code FinOps solution, or does low code somehow, by enforcing low code usage, you somehow get better control or have cheaper cloud?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to make the assumption that maybe low code increases the consumption by having more people services. But, it's the reason that we use AWS is because, there was a time back before the world of AWS and other cloud providers that everyone was building their own data centers and building their own cloud infrastructure. And you work with these big platforms like AWS because there's huge cost savings there, right? So by volume purchasing CPUs and storage and volume purchasing power, by leveraging those services, as Sarah just said, they can continuously drive down the cost of delivering these services. And of course, there's tools to monitor those costs and thresholds. So just you want to make sure you're using the AWS tools properly to set those notifications in. And obviously through Appian, you can administer who has access to the credentials to authenticate to those. So you can see the number of transactions. You can say, well, yeah, I'm going to set up what we call a connected system in Appian. It's going to store those credentials to the specific AWS services, and then I'm going to allocate that credential to specific users, and I can measure their usage and how many times they've executed that integration or where that integration is being used to compose in a larger application. So lots of techniques there, but
Yeah, and I blinked before, but some tools from Amazon that you could definitely use, like AWS budgets, is a great way to make sure that your costs are within the budget that you want for your application. You can use CloudWatch, CloudTrail, understand where your application is being used the most and make decisions there. So there's a lot of room with the tools, and then also Amazon provides those cost savings as well.
Yeah. So finally, it's also ideas on around low code. The spirit of low code overall is, I think, the same spirit we've been working on for the past, since the Turing machine came out, as far as how can we simplify how humans express to a computer what they want to do, right? So, we started with mechanical, we moved to punch cards, we moved to, assembly language programming, object-oriented programming. It's simply a natural evolution of software development and also a specialization in certain areas. So we see this continuing infinitely as far as that pursuit as a low-code vendor to simplify human communication with computers and how you can express intent to have a computer do what you want. But increasingly, we also see the impact of artificial intelligence because humans often do the same things over and over again. In artificial intelligence, as we use it today in our own designs, where we analyze what people are doing inside a low-code design and experience and try to predict what they're doing and then offer suggestions on those predictions. That's kind of the current state. You can actually see this today in some of our Appian design tools, like the Appian Process Modeler, where we actually have this little feature called recommendations. And while you're dragging and dropping nodes, we're actually predicting what you're going to do next and making a recommendation and quick access to the next node based on all the past design behavior. The next step of this really is then self-deriving AI, where AI systems then take even less input from a human of what your intent is, and then actually automatically build interfaces, automatically build processes, maybe even adjust themselves to optimize themselves for a specific business goal inside of that. There's a question also around Appian here that Appian Platform Security badge is the best in the vendor space within the industry. So yeah, we're really proud of our security standards. In partnership, of course, with AWS, who runs a lot of our infrastructure, we also have a lot of independent audits on the Appian platform that are completely independent of AWS, but really just validating our design. So those include like our ISO 27018, 27017, 27001. Those are industry standards for IT operations and data security management. We were the first low-code vendor back in 2015 to have FedRAMP with also DoD IL4 certification, as well as PCI, HIPAA compliance, UKG Cloud. We spend millions of dollars for independent auditors to basically look at the Appian infrastructure to ensure that the software that we're delivering is high quality and highly secure as well. and our customers rely on that. So we're really proud of it. And of course, AWS is a really important business partner in the delivery of that as well. So
Malcolm, if I may, on this one as well, let's be really clear. Using low code, no code is not a trade-off to having less security.
Yeah.
In many ways, some low code, no code solutions, such as an Appian one, may enhance your security posture.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Right? Yeah. And it's important when you look at low code tools, don't sacrifice those things, right? So don't say, hey,
absolutely. I mean, if you're, and I'm not pointing fingers or naming names, but if your low code, no code tool of choice is forcing you to sacrifice security considerations, time to look for another solution.
Yeah. There's a tool I often use called SSL Labs. I'm not sure if you've seen this before, but you go to sslabs.com. And if you want to understand like the basic security posture of any low code vendor software, simply plug in their URL. So like you could do this today. If you go to community.appian.com, you can register for your own personal version of Appian. We have a free version called Community Edition. And you can plug in that URL and see it will do a passive security scan of the entire design architecture of that web environment. Is it susceptible to a poodle attack? Is it susceptible to this? And you should really tell yourself, is anything less than an A+ score acceptable to you, especially in today's day and age where information security has huge impact on business operations. And you're not only that, but your reputation as a vendor that consumers want to do business with you on as well. So there's another question here, Alan. I'm sure, have you heard use cases in the Internet of Things space as well?
Oh, okay. I didn't see that. I had to go up. So if I may answer that first, and then Sarah, Malcolm join in. I actually have. I'm trying to remember, it was a company coming out of South. I actually interviewed a company that specializes in like IoT devices with low code, no code, even to bring up legacy IoT devices, up to snuff. And so there's no reason. Today's IoT, look, traditionally IoT devices, where you worried about headroom. Right, what could you run on these devices because you didn't have a full.
Yeah.
But increasingly, with edge computing and with the advent of the cloud, what runs quote unquote on the IoT device versus what the IoT device can connect to on the cloud.
Yeah,
kind of negates that.
I've seen two big use cases. And this is an area where we actually use a lot of IoT services from AWS as well. When it comes to IoT, I kind of try to bucket into two areas. You have ingestion of event streams from IoT devices with exception processing. So, for example, Appian's worked with a large silicon chip manufacturer out in California, and they had hundreds of these these silicon wafer devices being manufactured. And they use IoT sensors and all these, along with AWS services, to basically stream that information. And they're looking for potential failures of those IoT devices. So they're looking for pattern analysis using artificial intelligence to say, I'm going to predict that this wafer device is going to fail sometime in the next 2 weeks. And why they do that is to get on top of the supply chain issues. So they want to say, well, if I'm predicting an outage of this silicon manufacturing device through IoT streaming data, then I'm going to automatically trigger an application in Appian around a purchase request and say, well, if I trigger that application in Appian to initiate the purchase request of a replacement device, I can bypass supply chain issues, ensure I don't have outage, and then have that replacement device ready to go right when the other one fails. That's a combination of ingesting IoT, applying artificial intelligence, then with what we call case management in a low-code platform. And then the other case I see with IoT is basically triggering. How can I basically treat a IoT service just like a microservice? I can flip it on, flip it off. As we said, low-code tools are basically orchestrators. Do this, do this, do this, do this. And then I can control those devices just like any other microservice from an orchestration composition in a low-code tool. So cool. I know we're
on that one.
Yeah.
We've got a few more minutes if we want to talk about wrapping up. I think we've hit everything on our agenda. Do you see anything we missed, Malcolm?
No, I think we're good. So any final questions and Q&A, I think.
No. Sarah, if you don't mind, if and I know this is off script, I don't know if you have this prepared, but for folks who are on AWS and are thinking about maybe developing some codes, some apps in low code, no code, are there any specific AWS, and whether it's serverless or not even, any AWS resources you can point people to?
Sure. Well, AWS does have the free tier, so that's a great way to get started. More specifically towards serverless, we have AWS Quick Starts. Those are a great way to spin up a serverless environment, learn a little bit more how to develop an application for that. I'm sure, Malcolm, maybe you can kind of talk a little bit more about how they could do that with low code.
Sure, yeah. And of course, the easiest way for Appian, just go to appian.com. In the upper right, you'll see an option there called Start Free. Click on that button. It's just a simple registration form. And again, we have a free tier of our software. So the Appian Community Edition is going to give you up to 15 users for free, 250 BPM process transactions a day, one robotic process automation resource with 50 robotic process executions a day. So plenty of space to kind of not only explore the platform, but also use it in a limited production sense at that free tier. And of course, when you're ready to upgrade, we can go all the way up to millions of users and hundreds of thousands of transactions a day to accommodate the higher load as well.
Yep. Okay. Can we restate the SSL website you mentioned?
Yeah. So I'll post,
someone else had a connection issue. Go figure.
Yeah. The SSL Labs is right there, sslabs.com. It's from a third-party company called Qualys. And it's there's an option there. We go to that website called Test Your Server. And
Yes.
I love using this. Whenever I invest in some software, hey, check it out. Did they get that latest web server update? Making sure it's properly locked down, secure. And again, it's nothing active. It's a passive scan of the web server configuration. So it's not actually doing any type of active penetration attempt on that site.
Thank you. Finally, I want to mention for those of you in that chat and communications panel, if you go to the section marked handouts, right, you'll see there's several PDFs that the folks at Appian were kind enough to put out here: guides, low-code buyer's guide, pitfalls, just a lot of information. They're there for you. They're just clickable and you can grab them. So please do that. Appreciate it. I think actually Abby's put that up there. If we don't have anything else, though, Malcolm, I got to say really, really thank you, man. I haven't had this happen, and we've been knock wood lucky, down here in South Florida with storms. As a matter of fact, we haven't had much rain at all, and man, it just opened up to me.
Yeah, understandable. I grew up there, so understand the weather can be nasty. Yeah, we were actually just talking about the weather in San Diego and DC.
Yeah, well, anyway, and it's the end of hurricane season, so hopefully we make it through without a storm this year. But anyway, Sarah, Malcolm, thank you very much. Thank you very much to AWS and Appian for providing and sponsoring this webinar today. I hope our listeners had a chance to kind of get if you're not familiar with low code, to get a good flavor of it. If you are familiar, to build upon your existing knowledge base. If you're not watching this live and you're watching it on demand, I believe the handouts will be available there, so you can get to them, and you enjoy this on demand as well as live. But for now, this is it. This is Alan Schimmel. We're at TechStrong, and Malcolm, Sarah, thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.
All right, thank you. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.